So welcome, Signe Nielsen. Today, for taking the time, we will be talking about a newly opened little island in New York City. You were the landscape architect at the project. So first of all, I'd like to ask you if you can just explain when was the competition, who was at the beginning in the team, and how early on did you take part in this project?
So starting in late 2012, the donor, who is named Mr. Diller, Barry Diller, decided to have a competition when he was offered the opportunity to reimagine Pier 54. All the piers along the west side have these numbers, and so he made it a personal competition. He invited Bjarke Engels, Santiago Calatrava, and Thomas Heatherwick. And Thomas Heatherwick produced an absolutely magnificent pier design. The Heatherwick studio presented this the day of Hurricane Sandy, and it was deemed too expensive. And so they were asked to come back, which they did in 2013, and present a new concept. And it was at that time that they realized that they needed to build out their team. And so I was brought on along with Arup and Musa Rutledge, their marine engineers, in July of 2013.
And were you also involved in programming the park, like in terms of structuring the spaces?
Yes, we did a lot of work on, well, I would say the donor had a lot to do with influencing both the size of the performance venues, as well as their kind of technical sophistication, if you will, from a sound and light and production capacity. The one area that was always in flux for quite a while was what is now called the playground, which is the large central plaza area. And there was always a concern, and I've experienced this with many designers and owners, the fear of the void, as I call it, of emptiness. And, was it too big? Was it too small? How many people could fit into it comfortably? And so we did a lot of precedent studies of places around the world to see what that scale was and see if it felt right. There were some technical logistics, the most significant of which is allowing a fire truck to come into the pier and turn around in one maneuver and exit. So that was an influence on the overall size. Well, I do know that both Thomas Heatherwick and now today, when Mr. Diller describes the project, they talk about leaving the city through these bridges. And Thomas used to liken it, which I really loved, to the idea of a gangplank, going up to a passenger ship, and that ascent and leaving, one world behind and entering another world. So with that thought in mind, I was trying to figure out, what else can this space be other than just performance and some lawns you can lie on. So I thought about there is a type of Japanese garden that was developed in about the 16th century, and it's called a strolling garden. And I began thinking about walking and what experiences you would have. And I also should say that in my youth, I was a ballet dancer. And so I thought a lot about choreography and choreographing the way people move through space. So I thought about, what people do when they go uphill they tend to look down because it's kind of a struggle. And when they go downhill, they tend to look out because they've already been up that hill and they know the ground is stable and they don't have to look down and be sure that they have good footing. So then as you go up, you go in S curves essentially. And then each time you make a turn, you either look back at the city or you look out at the river or you look into the park. So it's a constantly changing sequence of views that get, I have to say, really more dramatic as you go higher up. And I think that that's one of the unique aspects of the park, is that you are able to get up so high and have a perspective back on the city and out to the harbor that you don't really get anywhere else in the park, because they're in Hudson River Park, because all the piers are flat.
You said you will show some images.
Sure, I would love to.
Please.
Come on, puppy. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So I think one of your questions might have also been, what was the inspiration for the pier? And Thomas's vision, which I think is shown well here, is the idea of a flying carpet. And my vision was more of a leaf floating on the water. So it's kind of the difference between a landscape architect and an architect. One is more structural, one is more kind of organic. But anyway, so that I think that visual is good. Then because you asked some questions about the pots, they're really extraordinary. So they're made up of number one is the pile. It's driven into the bedrock. Then on top of the pile is what we call the column capital. And then that receives the tulip or the pot that is made up of 5 petals. And then on top of that is a slab that holds the whole, all the pots together as a single unit. So it moves as a single unit. We did some mock-ups looking at color, whether they should be white or whether they should be sort of regular cement color. Then this I thought I would show you for views, because it shows you that there are, from sort of lower elevations as you walk around, you get internal views, and then from higher elevations you get these outward views. So that was a great deal of the thinking. These are early, as you can see, or no, you can't really tell, but I'm telling you, where there was only one path up to each of the sort of 3 high points. But in a lot of ways, the kind of shape of that, of the central open space has not changed very much. These are some water views that you get from within the park at lower elevations, just because we didn't want you to come there and not realize you were on an island. So, what we could see. And so this then, of course, influences, where we would put trees to frame views and things like that. So this is the final circulation plan. And if you can see my mouse, if I can find my mouse, there we are.
Yep.
Added stairs, so that now there are multiple ways up and down, and you don't have to retrace your steps when you go up or down. So that was I consider to be one of my great contributions to the project, actually, was to really persuade everyone that the High Line, for all of its beauty and splendor for the city, is very difficult to navigate casually. You kind of are marching in a line north or south. So that was an important part of it. This also shows this is really the final rendering of the size of things, of the materials of the paving, of the size of the main amphitheater, and also of the southern stage, which is really much, much more intimate. And so that's the white garden that I was referring to down in this area here. So what influenced our planting selection was this sort of compilation of sun, wind, slope, elevation, views, and then what kind of use we could accommodate. So that sort of putting those all together in a matrix, we came up with these zones. And so the planting kind of follows these zones. This looks at the impact of slope and where we could or could not put trees based on the slope, because the root balls would just be sticking out of the ground on these very severe slopes. Some slopes are not comfortable for people to sit on. Some are impossible to navigate, at a slope that is considered a gradient that is, we call it handicapped accessible. But here I think is a good image that shows you a section through and where you can see that the topography of the slab and the topography of the soil are not parallel. Mm-hmm. And so that happens throughout the park. This is our slope analysis, and this is what I struggled over for years, was when you see those really dark red and black colors, we're looking at slopes that cannot hold themselves. There's no way physically that soil will achieve what's called an angle of repose. It would just slide down the hill. So like my biggest fear, I would lie in bed at night and thinking about something called a California mudslide, where all the soil just shears off and lands in the plaza. So then we had to obviously start thinking about retaining walls in order to mediate some of these slopes, as well as all kinds of things we did to the soil. So this is the final planting plan, accurately drawn to the size of the trees at installation, so that you could really understand. And then it also shows the difference between evergreens, which are largely to block north winds, as well as the sound of the highway that's on this side of the park. And there's a structure on the north side that's not very attractive. So it's kind of a little bit of a embrace on the north and east, which are our worst winds. And then you can see here in the southwest how many more trees there are really than anywhere else. This shows you why we cared so much about the topography and the size of the trees. So showing how we could get different diameters of root balls into different gradients of slope. You asked a question about the pile capacity and the load capacity. So if you read the fine print here, the live load on every pile is 100 pounds a square foot, and the dead load, meaning soil, ranges from 550 pounds a square foot to 250 pounds a square foot. So that is what we were given to work with. So then we mapped the soil depth we needed in order to do the planting design that I showed you before. And then we made three-dimensional models of the root balls, and we tried to fit them into the available soil. And where it's green, it means there's a sufficient amount of soil to cover the root ball, and where it's red, it does not. So then we would work back and forth, Arup, Heatherwick, and us, and we would, send each other these notes. Can we get more soil? Do we need a higher retaining wall? And we went back and forth and back and forth. So this took a year just to get this all resolved. And so if you look at that analysis and plan, all the trees in red show insufficient soil depth, which is really a lot. And then it shows how much they are lacking. So 1 foot, 1.5 feet, that 2 feet was the worst. And then the green are trees for which there was no problem. So again, we just had to negotiate the pot profile, because we could not change the load, right? The pile has a load capacity. We could not change that, but we could just move things around. So then this is, again, where we are modeling different sizes, different calipers of trees, and fitting them into the soil volumes. And then finally, we made it all happen. Again, we still had a few reds here, but we have more green, so we were making progress. The fuchsia pink are the retaining walls. The orange is the stairs, and the gray is the path system. And then, at our last iteration, round 2, we still had a few trees that didn't have enough soil. Yellow is we barely had enough, and green we were fine. So we were making great progress. We nearly did it. And so some trees we eliminated, and some trees we just moved. A few trees we felt were just essential, like this tree right here. If you can see, it has a partner right here, and they kind of frame your view from the theater. And so it was essential to get this tree in. And so we had, again, to change the profile of the pots, and et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's I just thought those visuals would be helpful to you to understand kind of how this collaboration really worked. We had, I would say, 3 meetings a week among the team. We would share ideas for, what the retaining walls should be made of. We finally suggested that we use really very mundane sheet pile, which is a marine industrial product right off the shelf. And once that decision was made, then that kind of translated into the materiality of the entire park. So the tonality of the paving, the materials of the railing, and it became a kind of a warm palette, as we call it. The exposed aggregate color of the paths. And so, I would say it was just fair game. Whoever had a good idea, we went with it. It was, there was no proprietary or ego. I mean, I truly have to say that never in my career, which is fairly long at this point, have I ever worked on a project that was as truly collaborative and excitingly collaborative as this was.
How many people can the island accept at once?
That they're testing that now. I mean, we obviously did various studies on audience capacity, both in the theater, in the Glade, the smaller performance area, as well as in the plaza. And, we got up to pretty high numbers, but the executive director who's running Little Island now, and Mr. Diller himself really don't want this to become like the High Line, where New Yorkers feel, it's just for tourists. So they're trying to manage the crowd. So they offer, I believe it is 800 tickets a day, but in the morning it's open to anyone. But you don't have to leave. So if you add 800 people to the people who already come in the morning, I'm not sure what that number is. I think I noticed yesterday when I was there that they now have somebody like clicking how many people are walking on the paths, and to try to really understand this. But I would say I was there last night to give a tour between 6 and 8 p.m. It felt really comfortable. There was, you weren't bumping into people. People could stop and look and not congest things. Some people were, getting a drink in the main plaza area. It felt very comfortable. So I think they're doing a good job. I'm sure that there's frustration on the part of, people who want to go see it. But I appreciate that right from the outset, they're trying to, manage it so that people who live nearby or people who run on the Esplanade, don't feel that they're excluded from it. So.
And what were the first? What's the feedback?
People who actually go there and visit it, I've heard nothing but good things. And I was speaking with the executive director last evening, and she was saying that she talked to a few people who just kind of volunteered their thoughts. And I think what gratified her the most, and certainly me too, is that it's attracting a very diverse group of people in age, in ethnicity, and that's pretty remarkable. I'm not quite sure how that. I mean, I know that the Little Island group has really been trying to make sure that that all the residents of the city understand that this is a place for them, and it's not just a developer's dream. And it obviously has worked. I mean, whenever I've been there, and it's now been every day, I really see an incredibly diverse group of people, from little kids, just toddlers learning how to walk, to old people in wheelchairs or walkers or holding each other arm in arm, which will be me in not very long. And it's just beautiful. It's really great.
So thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Of course. Thank you very much.
I wish all success to MNLA and to the Little Island, and I hope we talk soon.
Okay. Thank you very much.